Hey folks, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the final installment in the series on client fears and confronting our kind of deepest fears when it comes to working with clients as illustrators. So this installment I am pretty excited about. I feel like this is kind of one of the biggest areas of fear that we all struggle with. It probably was the most common of the fears that you all submitted, and that is money, different things related to money. So I think we have four specific fears that we're going to be addressing today. But first off, I do want to just mention straight up that when it comes to pricing and money, that knowledge is not only powerful, but I think it can be a real antidote to fear-based thinking. A lot of the challenge with money in illustration and money in clients in illustration is that there is a lot of uncertainty, like some of these other areas that we were talking about already. So having the veil lifted a little bit, having more information is going to hopefully help you feel more powerful and less fearful. So a few resources. Some of these are things that I have already mentioned certainly in other videos and even in this series so far. The first one is the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook for Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. It has pricing tables in it. I talk about it all the time. It's $30. If you are interested in commercial illustration, if you have anxiety about quoting prices to clients, get the guide if you can, or go to your library or get a used copy. It's okay if it's not the most current edition. I know $30 isn't nothing, but the amount of anxiety that we spend, certainly the amount of anxiety that I spent on knowing how to price things and what something should cost was just enormous when I was first getting started. And there was so much uncertainty, so much doubt, so much fear around that. It is one of the few things that I've said, like I don't say, wow, I really wish I had started using more expensive paper earlier on. No, I think I started using nicer paper at exactly the right time when I was trying the techniques that needed to go along with that. I very rarely look back and feel regret about things. But this is actually something that I regret. I wish I had bought it sooner. I heard about it. I saw other people talking about it. I don't get any, they don't sponsor me. I just genuinely think it is so helpful to have any sort. It's not perfect, you guys. It's not a perfect resource, but it's so helpful to have anything. So there's my soapbox for why you should just spend 25 or 30 bucks if you can and get the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook for Pricing and Ethical Guidelines, a free resource that has, I find it super helpful to use along with the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook, is Lightbox. And I think I just talked about this in my Skillshare class and I said their URL wrong. I think it's lightbox.info. It will be on the screen and it will be in the description box, but they are updated live. So other illustrators are constantly submitting prices and projects that they've worked on. There's tons of stuff that's in like the children's book, some stuff for magazines and editorials, some stuff for gaming, some stuff for like motion and TV. I haven't seen a ton of stuff in there for packaging, but yeah, lots of different areas overall. So having those two things, those are just different lists of very concrete numbers that you can look up and see. And it's so helpful if you're trying to do flat rate pricing. I've also mentioned this one before. It says, I don't know if she still has the free one, but Jessica Hish has a PDF called The Dark Art of Pricing. Years ago, it was I think the first pricing document that I read and saw, and for so much time I was like looking around online trying to find pricing. There was nothing. There really wasn't very much even on YouTube then, and it was really hard to find concrete numbers or concrete information. It was more just like pricing is difficult, but that's all anybody would say. Yes, Jessica Hish's PDF was what was then a free PDF, was the first one, the first concrete had the first concrete numbers that I had ever seen in illustration, and it blew my mind. And then I got the gag guide and started getting some other resources and just feeling a little bit more confident in pricing. She now has what is a lot, much more in depth and more more information, more concrete numbers, more helpful tools for kind of figuring out rates and all of that in what is a paid PDF. I believe it's $15. And I think she also has like discounts for students and stuff, and maybe even like financial hardship discounts on there. And 15 is certainly less than 30. So if you are in a tight financial spot, that might be a good place to start as opposed to the gag guide. And then of course your friends. There are various different Facebook groups, peers rather, not the friends. Other illustrators that you know online. I've been pretty transparent about this over the years. You can always ask me. On that note, actually, I've gotten quite a number of emails lately of just people telling me they would like to have me on retainer, like to answer their pricing needs. I don't do that. But if you are new and you're getting started in illustration, a client has contacted you, you have an actual project, an actual question, and you don't know what to charge, you can always message me on Instagram or email me, and I will try my best to get back to you. But yeah, that's not just like unfortunately, that's not just like a blanket offer for me to like get on the phone and talk with different people about how to structure their pricing. But if you have a concrete question, you have a client that's reached out to you and you don't know how to reply, then you can always feel free to reach out to me, and I will do my best to answer. And I know that there are a number of other artists who have made that offer as well. If any of you happen to be watching this video and you want to reply in the comments and let people know that they can reach out to you to ask as well, that would be great. So resources, the gag guide, Lightbox, Jessica Hish's Stark Art of Pricing, and of course your peers like me. All right, so let's move on to the actual fears that we're addressing in this video. All right, the first fear is the fear of asking too much and never hearing back from the client. So this one comes up all the time. I have started doing some coaching over the past year. This is something that's pretty common, a common fear there too. This was a fear that I had in the beginning. And I guess if I'm really honest, it still is somewhat of a fear today. And it's only really a fear if it's a project that I really want to do. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is a cool project. I hope they have a good budget for it. So I don't feel it in quite as pressing of a way as I did when I was first getting started, but still, it is a very real universal fear. We are all afraid that if we ask for too much, the client is going to just ghost us and not hear back. So I guess first what I would say to that is that there are plenty of other reasons besides your price being too high that the client might have ghosted you. I hear this a lot too, and see this talked about a lot on social media. People saying like, well, I asked her a price and then I didn't hear back. You know, if only I had asked for $50 less or something. It's probably not to do with the price, or it's probably not to do, well, I'll say more about that in a minute, but I will say I am almost constantly booked. And again, not in a bragging way. I'm just trying to tell you guys what's going on and how much this is still something I deal with. I'm pretty much constantly booked for the past 2.5 years. I've had hardly any gaps in client work, thankfully, and I still get ghosted all the time. I get so many client inquiries and projects, and I'll respond and just hear nothing back. And plenty of reasons, other reasons that they might be ghosting me besides the price. Number one, they're busy. Maybe they emailed me and then emailed someone else and ended up hearing back, from another illustrator whose style that they liked better and just haven't had a chance to reply to me. Maybe they're busy and the project has been on hold, and so they haven't said anything new. A lot of the time, if the inquiry is from an agency, they will reach out to you to get a price and then bring that information back to the client. So they're not always ready, to run right out of the gate to get going on the project when they reach out to you. So maybe they've reached out to you, gotten your quote, and it's with the client. Maybe they just decided to go, like I mentioned, maybe they decided to go in another direction stylistically, or maybe you proposed a timeline that didn't work for them. And most of the time, I would say, of course I can't say all the time, but most of the time, if the reason they're ghosting you is truly about the money, it's not because you were a little too high. So let's say maybe you asked for $200 for a spot illustration, and it turns out their budget is $175, and you're thinking, oh, if only I had just said $175. If that was the case, if you asked for $200 and they had a budget of $175, they would email you back. They would say, well, wow, our budget is 175, or, maybe could you do 180? If you are that close, if it's a matter of, $25, $50, and, if it's a larger project, if it's a matter of a few $100s, if you are close, they will, and they're serious, they will reply and let you know. So you really don't have to be afraid of that. The reality is, if they're not emailing you back because of the money, it's because you asked for 200 and their budget is 25, or you asked for 200 and their budget is exposure. There actually isn't any money. So that I would just try as much as you can to just let that fear go. If you're close on the price, if they weren't that far, it's not a matter of you needing to just come down a little bit and just hit the nail on the head. And even if you were pretty far off, I have had clients come back to me. There was a packaging job maybe 2 years ago where I quoted what was a pretty standard rate for me, and then it turned out they only had like half of the budget, and they were somebody I had worked with before. I knew that they were pretty transparent, and I said, I could make this work. I replied back, constraining the scope a little bit and upping their budget a little bit, and said, do you have any wiggle room? Would that be possible? And they couldn't, so they went in another direction. The point I'm trying to get across here is, if the client is serious, if they actually would potentially follow through with you, and they actually do have a real budget, not just like $25 for something that should cost $250. If they're serious and they have a real budget, they will respond. They won't ghost you, or they might ghost you for another reason. Those other reasons that I just mentioned, style, timeline, busyness, whatever. But losing sleep and being afraid and kind of undercharging because maybe you said, I'd like to charge 200, but I'm going to only charge 175 because I really want to get this client. Saying 175 isn't going to make any difference if their price is 25, if their budget is 25, or if they have no budget at all. So, yes, if they're serious and they do actually have some kind of a budget, they won't ghost you because of price. One other note that I would say on this topic is, especially if you are a woman, which most people watching my channel are. So if you are a woman, I would just gently and with all the kindness that I can remind you that we tend to undervalue ourselves. And I would, again, gently and kindly challenge you to ask for a little bit more than you're comfortable asking for. So I think the way that some of us tend to, and this isn't just, I think maybe a lot of illustrators do this, not just women, but I do talk to a lot of women who struggle with this more than men do. That we tend to come up with a number that we feel okay asking for, that we feel isn't presumptuous or wouldn't offend or wouldn't step on anybody's toes or wouldn't make it seem like we overvalue ourselves. But we need to be asking for what is fair, what we can live on, and what will actually support a healthy industry going forward. So I would challenge you to, if you have that number that you feel okay asking for, ask for a little bit more. Ask for something that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, which does lead me very nicely into the next point, which is the fear of not asking for enough and undervaluing my work. So it's kind of the opposite of the fear that we just talked about. We just talked about the fear of asking for too much and having the client never respond. Opposite is the fear of not asking for enough and undervaluing my work. So I have been popping a lot of balloons in this series, and so I'll just go ahead and pop another one right here and let the air out. What analogy am I even going for here? But yes, you will definitely do this at some point. At some point, you will undervalue your work and not ask for enough. That's going to happen. I have done this. I still do this regularly. And that is because value is a little bit of a moving target. There isn't any concrete point when you can say, like, this is the value of this illustration and it's true in every context, or it's true in all these kinds of contexts. Even if you can say, well, packaging illustration has this value that's greater than editorial illustration, which we've talked about in a lot of videos, there isn't just one universal packaging illustration. There's so many different packaging projects. You could be doing something for a mom and pop business. You could be doing something for a regional business. You could be doing something for an international corporation, and those would each have different value points. So every single time you're having to kind of figure this out and value your work based off of hopefully some of these concrete resources that we've talked about, but also the experience that you have in knowing how much time you're going to invest in this, how much value this is going to bring to the client, trying to figure out all of that has a lot of gray area in it. So just accept that you're gonna do this at some point, and it will probably be a challenge that you continue to struggle with if you're anything like me, and you just have to kind of keep tackling it each time. And that's actually kind of one of the beauties of freelance and working as a freelance illustrator, is that you're not negotiating your salary for the entire year, or a job that you're going to be at for 5 years where you're locked into it. You're negotiating a project, and if you don't get it quite right this time, then you have the next time to try as well. This is something you're just going to do over and over and over again, and it will hopefully get, if not easier, at least a little bit more familiar. And I guess the most concrete thing that I want to say here in terms of how to address this is having those external resources. So I think if you're just trying to figure out your value or how to value an illustration completely by yourself in a vacuum, or maybe just like on random internet forums, something that doesn't have any sort of, that's not mostly drawn from professionals working in the field, you're going to get just wide ranges of pricing information, of people saying that, it should cost $25 to do a portrait. It should not cost $25 to do a portrait. Or people saying it should cost, $700 to do a spot illustration, which if you can get $700 for a spot illustration, that's great. I applaud you. I can't get $700 for a spot illustration. But having these concrete resources and having a few different trusted resources that you can look to is going to go so far in giving you a sense of ground to stand on when you're trying to value your work appropriately. All right, next fear, and that is the fear of negotiating or asking for more money. All right, so just like you undervaluing your work, the fear of undervaluing your work and not asking for enough, the client wanting to negotiate, or you wanting to negotiate with the client, needing to negotiate with the client, that's going to happen at some point too. That's just an inevitable in this field. It doesn't have to necessarily feel the way, I know that there's all kinds of theories about negotiation and tactics and who says what first and all of that. I guess I am diminishing that. I'm not meaning to diminish that. I will say that's not something I put a ton of effort into. I put a lot more effort into figuring out what I believe and what others believe a fair, appropriate price is, and just trying to feel confident in that, as opposed to, playing mind games with the client. That being said, a few specific things that you can do. Number one is something we talk about all the time, and it's something that I also struggle with, but can be so helpful, is just asking, the client reaches out to you and asks for a quote. Your response can be, yes, would be happy to put together some options for you. Can you give me a sense of your rough budget so I can propose options that would work within it for you? So ask the client to put the number out there first. And if they then say, oh, well, we'd rather just see what you come up with, which is common, that happens a lot, then you can go from there and you can propose your numbers. But yes, there is absolutely, you have every reason to just go ahead and ask the client what their budget is. And that's totally fine. That's totally professional. It's a good thing to do. Next thing is that, when you do propose your number, I think we have a tendency, well, maybe not everybody, but if you're like me, I'll say it that way. If you're like me, you probably early on have a tendency to say, well, I need to quote what the lowest possible number is that I would be okay doing this. And I quickly learned that that's not a good idea, because a lot of clients, not every client, but a lot of clients will try to negotiate. And so if you say, I'll do this spot illustration for 200, then they'll say, okay, well, what about 100? Or we only have probably what they would say is we only have, because it's not swap meet haggling. They won't say, well, would you take 20? They don't do that like you're haggling at a garage sale or something. But what they would say is, oh, well, we only have a budget of 100 for this spot illustration, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's concretely true. They probably have a broader illustration budget, but for what they can spend in a whole year, if it's like a magazine or something, they have a broader illustration budget, but they may not necessarily have a concrete budget for that column or for that piece or whatever. So just because they say they do doesn't necessarily mean that's true. So don't come right out the gate with your absolute lowest number. This is probably like negotiation 101. But if you feel like, okay, well, the lowest I'd be happy doing this for is 200, go ahead and ask for 300. And that's part of why I said what I said earlier about encouraging, especially women, but I guess all illustrators, to ask for a little bit more than you feel comfortable asking. And certainly ask for more than the bottom line of what you would need to do it for. And then see where that gets you. There will be some clients that will just agree. And then there will be some clients that will say, oh yeah, well, we can't do it for that, but we can do it for this. A very common negotiating tactic that I have learned, not one that I use, but clients have used it on me, is I propose a number and then they just come back and say, well, our budget is only half of whatever that number is. And if they, I guess this is another point, if they do that, you don't just have to take it. It's just like with contracts. You don't just have to sign the contract. You don't just have to take whatever they propose or whatever they say their budget is. And that's probably, I think that's probably like the main takeaway. The biggest thing that I would hope that you would get from this is that just because they say it's their budget doesn't mean that you have to accept that. So rather than just saying, say you proposed $1,000 for a full page illustration, we're doing lots of editorial examples here. Sorry if you're not in that, but say you proposed $1,000, your fee is $1,000 for a full page illustration, and they say, well, we only have 500. There are a few things that you can do besides just saying, all right, I'll do it for 500. Well, number one, you can walk away. You could say, oh no, can't do it for that. And that is a possibility, quite literally. Other things that you could do would be to, this is the approach that I would take. One, try to get the price up, and then also try to shrink the scope down. So you can say, rather than saying, okay, well, what about 750? You can say, ask them to put forward the number. Say, okay, well, what is, can you come up at all? What's the highest that you can get to? And ask them to put that number out there. So along with that, you can say, I could potentially come down in the pricing a little bit if we constrained the scope of the project. So maybe initially this illustration was going to have like 5 figures in it. You could say I could potentially come down a little bit if we, limited it to only have 3 figures in it. What's the highest? How much could you get your budget up? So asking them putting the onus on them to be the one who actually comes up with that next number, rather than replying yourself and saying, how about 750? So asking to shrink the budget, shrink the scope, and telling them specifically how you would shrink the scope, how you propose to shrink the scope, and then asking them to be the ones that put out the next figure. That's what I would do. That's what I do when they come back and say that the budget that I've proposed doesn't work for them. And the bottom line is that negotiating should not be the client getting absolutely everything that they want for the price that they dictate and you just having to deal with it if you want to work an illustration. There will be some times when the client can't get the budget up at all, but maybe you can shrink the scope down quite considerably to the point where the budget seems okay, especially if it's a project that you're interested in, that you feel would be a fun project or one that you want to have in your portfolio. And again, don't feel guilty if you are in the place where you are having to take on work that doesn't pay as well as you should be paid because you're in a financial position where you need to do that. I would never judge anybody for doing that, and I hope other illustrators wouldn't either. So this is not me telling you that you have to be willing to get it up to market rate or just walk away. I understand that there are different circumstances, different needs, and we're all coming to this from our own unique places in life. So just try to push, if the number is smaller than you throw out there, if they don't take your budget, try to push that scope down or pull that scope down and push up that budget gradually when you can. And hopefully if you're in this for the long haul, if you're in it year after year, that will be something that happens gradually over time as well. So I hope that was okay. I feel like I was kind of all over the place, and I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious because initially I said I don't really try to play mind games with clients, and I don't think I do try to play mind games with clients, but I'm realizing a number of the things I said do sound kind of mind gamey. So, oh well, this is, like I said, this is at the beginning of the series. This is a coffee shop chat, so I'm just being a human being and contradicting myself here. On to, I think, the fourth fear. yes, the fourth and last fear, the last fear we're going to address in this video and in this series. And that is the fear that when all is said and done, the client won't pay me. So this is a good fear to have, actually, because it is something that can happen sometimes. But there are some things that you can do. Just like everything else we've talked about, the best cure for this is preparation and having that clear foundation laid. So if you are watching this video because you searched like, client won't pay me, what do I do? And now you're watching this video, I'm sorry, there's not going to be a lot. I'll say maybe a little bit on how to deal with that. But much of what I'm going to say is just about preparation. So still, you should watch this because it's going to tell you what to do next time to hopefully avoid some of that pain. But yes, the best thing you can do to ensure that you get paid is to have a clear foundation. So two kind of broad approaches to take. One, if it's a smaller company that you're working with, or maybe an individual, a solopreneur, or even like a private commission, somebody who, maybe you're doing a portrait of somebody doing pet portraits or something. You should require upfront payment before you actually give them the art. And you might even require upfront payment before you start making the work. So a lot of people who do commissions, who work with individuals to do private commissions, will ask for like 50% upfront and then 50% before they send the work. And that can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but let me tell you, it does not feel as uncomfortable as making work and then not getting paid for it, or making work and giving it to somebody and then not having them follow through on paying you. So becoming accepting the fact that you are going to feel uncomfortable about it. It's uncomfortable to ask for people to pay up front if you haven't done it before. I am pretty used to that now, so it doesn't feel that uncomfortable to me, but I can remember what it's like to be new, and I remember that it is really hard to ask for upfront payment. And that's just something that you would share with the client when you're sharing your process and all the things that go into your process. You can just say, have a little line in there, another, what's that called? Paragraph, where you talk about, how payment works, that you accept 50% upfront, and you can do it by PayPal or check or whatever form you want to accept, and then 50% before the final work is delivered. So yes, it feels uncomfortable to do that if you're unfamiliar with it, if you haven't done it before. I'm not trying to minimize that discomfort, but just try to imagine the discomfort that you will be in if the client doesn't pay, and how hard it will be to get the client to pay. And it's very hard to get an individual or a private entity to pay if it's for a commission. So smaller companies or individuals require upfront payment, or some significant deposit, and then the remainder of the payment before they actually get the deliverable. And then for larger companies, you can require a deposit. It's always good to require a deposit. A larger company could be a smaller deposit, something maybe like 25% or so 25 to 50%. If you're working with that smaller company, I think it should be at least 50%. And then the other thing that you want to do with a larger company is include something called a contingent upon use is contingent upon payment clause. So basically, you want to have a paragraph in your contract that says that the client's right to use that work is contingent on you being paid the agreed upon amount in full. So I've had this question recently. I guess I'll go ahead and answer it here, but I've had a question that, what do you do when working with editorial clients? Is it common for the work to be delivered and published before you've been paid? And the answer is yes, but it's not quite as scary and terrifying as it seems, especially if it's a larger magazine, or at least it's not even larger, an established magazine. That's just kind of how the timing works. It's fairly standard that that they don't pay people until afterwards. But having that clause in the contract that their right to do it is contingent upon them paying you, that is really quite protective, because if you were to take that to court, you would have a lot to stand on, a lot of legs to stand on. And big companies, they don't want the hassle of going to court either. Big magazines don't want the hassle of that. So I have never had issues. They take a long time to get paid by a big magazine, but any of the non-payment issues I've had have always been with small companies or small nonprofits or individuals. And I haven't had any recently because I built in a lot of structures to help me avoid it. But yeah, all of those issues have been with smaller companies and individuals. So larger ones have not been as much of a problem. So yes, you can include your contingent upon payment clause, ask for a deposit. And if you do have a deposit, this is something we probably should have tackled when we were talking about revisions. But if you get your deposit and a client then suddenly changes their mind or decides to go in a different direction, or maybe maybe it's no fault of their own, maybe a product gets pulled or something, but there's something that changes the plan and your illustration work is no longer needed, then making sure that you have not just the deposit, but that you also have a paragraph, have a kill fee in your contract, which is a paragraph that stipulates a certain amount that you're going to be paid depending on when the project is cut off, if the project is cut off and canceled. So that can be another way to protect as well, not just against non-payment, but against like the plug being pulled and then having non-payment. Now, what happens if you are that person watching this video who's already in the boat where things have gone off the rails, where there's been trouble, where the client is significantly late or behind in payment? There are a number of different things you can do. The first thing is hopefully you have been documenting everything. So hopefully you have sent invoices with invoice numbers and due dates, and really actually had a concrete paper trail. And by paper trail, I don't mean like actual paper, like you could have emailed it to them. But be sure that you have sent an invoice. And then once they are significantly late, like let's say they're 30 days overdue or 60 days overdue, which can happen. I have had that happen. Actually I skipped the step. Let's say if they're a week late, let's say if they're just a little bit late, then, send a personal follow-up email. So I have a platform that I use called Bonsai that, not sponsored, but it's what I use. I do my invoices from there. They send it automatically for me once a project is finished. And then once it gets close to the due date, they send a reminder email a week before the due date. And then once the due date has passed, they send an email every day, but they're automated emails. So if it gets to a week past the due date, then I will go ahead and send a follow-up email myself, like a personal follow-up email, just being like, hey, wanted to touch base, see if anything was missing here, anything I can do to facilitate payment on this, and then just kind of leave it at that. And most of the time, that's more than enough to kind of get the ball rolling. But there will still be some times when it's significantly late, it's 30 days late or more. And if that happens, then, of course, continuing to send emails, probably weekly emails, checking in up until that time. And then after the 30-day mark, I would pick up the phone and, follow up with them in person, just be like, hey, just curious. I'd love to understand, what's going on here. What can I do to facilitate payment here? And then if that doesn't work, I've only had to do this one time. But if that doesn't work, then emailing people up the food chain. So a lot of the time, especially if it's a company, the person that you're working with is not the only person there. There's other people involved. So do whatever you can. Google, find out who else works there, and then send them emails. And that has worked for me in getting paid. I did that for a project that was a few $1,000s, so it was a significant project, and they hadn't paid me for like 7 or 8 months. Like they were 7 or 8 months late, and it took me a long time. I didn't do it at the 1 month mark or the 2 month mark. I didn't do it until like month 7. That's when I reached out to the members of the board and other people who worked there, and it was paid almost immediately. And then, of course, other options. These are things I haven't had to do, but if it's for like a small individual who's maybe already using the work, you can send a cease and desist form letter. There's a cease and desist form letter in the gag guide. Small claims court is also an option. It's not something I know about, but I do know that I don't know about it personally, but I do know that you have to have it has to be worth your while, because it's going to cost money to do that. And then the nuclear option is to shame them on social media. And that's really only something, I don't know, I'd have to think about when I would do that. And it really only would work with a bigger company, because they care about their reputation in a way that, if it's somebody's second cousin's aunt who commissioned you to draw their pet cat, shaming that person on social media isn't really going to work. So that's really only something that would work for a big company anyway. But I know some people will reach for that option a lot sooner. And I personally think it's very, you're never going to work with that client again if you do that. So for me, it would be the last resort. Yes, if you have any other ideas of ways that you handle non-payment or you deal with non-payment, please leave those in the comments. And yeah, if you have any other fears or any other questions or things that you want to talk about in a future video, you know where to leave them. And yeah, that's it for this series. Hopefully you're taking away some concrete knowledge as well as some encouragement and feeling encouraged and not alone. And I know sometimes that is just as helpful and important as the concrete knowledge. So all these fears are normal. You're just a normal human being. Everybody has them. We're all struggling with this stuff together, all dealing with it together. So thank you for sharing your fears with me. And oh my goodness, I'm almost out of time on this video, so I'm just gonna have to wrap it up. Thank you for sharing your fears with me. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great and brave weekend. I will see you next video. Bye.